One. Alright, we're starting.
Hello, everyone. This is the 9th Theory Crafting Roundtable podcast. I'm Artesians, and I am joined today by Tenten, Azel, and XF3. We'll go through their introductions real quick. Azel is a member of the Kitchen Main staff. He's been in the theory crafting community for a very long time and works a lot with other communities. He's developed his own spreadsheet that a lot of people use these days to calculate team DPS. Tenten is a very influential YouTuber, mostly focusing on value of your pools, specifically the value of your pools. He's not afraid to call something bad if he thinks it's bad. And XF3 is another member of the Kitchen Main staff. He does a lot of work with the infographics on our website and all that good stuff. And I am Artesians. I am the head of theory crafting and Kitchen Mains. Hello. Today we are not joined by Jinx because I believe he's still on break from video games or he's playing Monster Hunter Rise. So he's gone, and then Zajev went to bed because he
ditched us.
He ditched us, yeah.
Just like Zyos. Every time we invite Zyos.
Yeah. And then Citri, unfortunately, has left the theory crafting community or is on a very long break, a very well-deserved break, and Citri will probably not be joining us on the podcast any longer. And for those of you guys that don't remember, he was the head of theory crafting at Wangqing Funeral Parlor. Okay. Before we get started and rolling on our topics, Azel has an announcement for you about the podcast.
Yes, we do. So the podcast is now actually on Apple Podcasts, and on Spotify is under the name Theory Casting, combination of theory crafting and podcasting, theory casting with Kaching mates. So go listen to this podcast on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or wherever you like to get your podcasts.
Speaking of,
you can definitely download it.
Yeah. Speaking of being on Spotify, I think the Kachiming podcast is also looking for a sponsor for our podcast. So if you're interested, you can reach out to us. All right.
Reach out to Tenten, actually. Then we'll sort it out.
Yeah.
Okay. And anyways, we can go ahead and get started. Did anything happen this week in Genshin besides that?
There's a lot of controversy going on.
It's really.
That's what we're kind of... I know we don't really talk about controversy a lot, but... I mean, we kind of should. That's why they're controversial, but yeah.
Let's get into it. What's the first controversy, Mr. Tenten?
I think with the Ganyu rerun, there is a lot of controversy around the war between Ganyu versus Ayaka, and that's kind of something I feel like we should address. Especially since it's the war is kind of really bad right now. It's like Ganyu is better than Ayaka or Ayaka is better than Ganyu, but reality is like it doesn't really matter. Like,
I talked about this last week actually, and we went into light detail. Did it explode again? It's quite funny.
There was a Reddit post with like 10,000 upvote, and it was like the best element, best DPS for every element. And then when I saw that picture and they put Ganyu on it, I immediately know like it's gonna be a war between Ayaka and Ganyu.
Oh yeah, that sounds. Yeah.
When I first saw it, I'm like, he should have just put both Ayaka and Ganyu on. If anyone was curious, he put Hu Tao for Pyro instead of Xiangling, but honestly, I don't mind that one. Like, I feel like...
Oh, I see it. Hold on, let me pull it up for you. I'll link it in general if you want to pull it up as well.
Also, like, yeah, there's some community perception of Ganyu falling off. I feel like we talked about this last week, but not too depth, so we can talk about it.
So on this picture, for the people that are listening somewhere without video, you have Hu Tao for Pyro, Raiden Shogun for Electro, Ganyu for Cryo, Zhao for Animo, Eula for physical damage, Child for hydro damage, and Ito for geo damage. So, yeah, that'll be interesting to talk about. Okay. So
wait, there are 3,800 comments on this post.
Yeah. It was. Also, I'm showing how not to play Ganyu right now by missing all my aim attack, and I just missed another charge attack.
Skill issue.
Yeah, I'm actually a skill issue. Anyway, the biggest debate between the topic was Ayaka and Ganyu, and then also Xiangling and Hu Tao. But I feel like Xiangling and Hu Tao is not too big of a deal, so we can talk about Ganyu and Ayaka. Anyone
Okay.
want to get started?
So I mean, it's interesting because very rarely do we ever see such a hodgepodge of like takes and stuff like that. Typically, it's very hard to keep track of what the community's perceptions are, and I'll have fun reading through this later. I'll probably do this after the podcast. But yeah, it's actually very interesting to see what everyone is arguing over.
Yeah, it's actually so the reason why it's interesting because it's really hard for us to see like what the community is suddenly like on rampage about, but this time it was like really obvious, right? So that's why it's controversial. You obviously have sudden rampage, small rampages like Kokomi and Chao and stuff, but those are really small, right? And this time it's like different. So. Any opening thoughts about? Because am I the only one who actually read the thing already?
I did not read it, so yes.
I saw the image, but I didn't see the comments.
I mean,
I just know people were mad, and that's it. So yeah, Tenten, you're the only one.
I see a lot of Xiangling. I at least see a lot of Ayaka. I mean, this is about expected. Xiangling, Ayaka. I saw some comment about Sucrose earlier. No, I mean, this is going to be very interesting. I'll give it a read later, but in general, this kind of stuff is I don't know. It's very interesting.
It's interesting,
Main
especially
DPS is very interesting.
So
is the quote.
The thing is, like, I think objectively speaking, Ganyu and Ayaka are the two top tier characters at the moment. Like, as in, if your name is not Ganyu Ayaka, you're below those two characters. Which basically I'm trying to say is Ganyu and Ayaka are they're the first place or the second place in either direction. And people are arguing
in terms of DPS.
Yeah. Or in terms of just everything.
Really?
You don't think so?
Just like all characters? I think
no. In terms of DPS, no. In terms of DPS, yeah. In terms of DPS. Oh, not
yeah.
including support. Yeah. Like in terms of DPS, like either Ganyu is first place or Ayaka is second, or the other way around. Ayaka is first and Ganyu is second. But my point is, they're both like at the top of the leaderboard. That it's so pointless to argue between them when they're already better than like everyone else. It's what I feel like. So you're literally arguing, oh, I'm not number one, I have to be number one. You know what I mean? Like,
I think there's an argument to be made that there are other characters who are close to them, but they're definitely like near the top.
Yeah.
I would say that you could make an argument for Xiangling being quite close. You could possibly make an argument for Hu-Tao being close, and you could make an argument for Raiden being close. Although Raiden is a bit more sus, I think, than the other two. But I think you could definitely make those arguments. It's just kind of difficult to say because honestly, these comparisons are just made like it's just so difficult to make these comparisons because all of these characters have different strengths, and it's not just purely their DPS numbers. So, like, first off, the community doesn't actually know the DPS numbers for these characters. No one, I think, besides the people who actually calc this out, could tell me how much damage does Ganyu Freeze do in a rotation. And even past that, you have to take into account not only those DPS numbers, but you also have to take into account their like specific strengths, their specific weaknesses. Because just because they have X DPS number doesn't account for like ease of achieving that DPS number, how many supports you need in order to do that, things like that. So there's just so much to account for that it's really difficult to just straight up like compare DPSs, like Ganyu and like Ganyu is better than Ayaka or Ayaka is better than Ganyu. So overall, I think the argument's kind of weird. I think it's a comparison that you can make if you're well informed, but it's just the people making these comparisons typically don't have the full picture, which leads to their comparisons being off-center.
Yeah, I mean, it's particularly hard to really get people to pay attention long enough for these types of things. But X3, did you have any thoughts on it?
Like, I don't. For me, at least when it comes to comparing characters, I like to compare, like, investment and like your overall account. Like, I'd say Ayaka is like pretty. I'd say Ayaka is better for your account if you like have nothing, because he doesn't need much for a team. But like a character like Ganyu is pretty greedy in terms of like specific characters. And yes, she can like quote unquote be better, but how often are you going to be in that strength, like ventiable content or whatever? Or how often will you be able to use your Bennett for melt all the time instead of using it on the other team? It's like there's too many factors that fall into each character that's like you can't really rate them equally for like a top DPS thing. You just have to treat them as like individual things, and you can talk about strengths and weaknesses of each other.
Yeah, I think I would definitely agree. I don't think people really have the ability to have such a nuanced view on it. For Ganyu and Ayaka specifically, if you want like the answer, hang on.
Oh, reversion. You know what I was thinking just
Fusion
now?
bye.
That
What were you
Azo
thinking, Tenten?
was talking about like how do people know like this character do more damage than the other? Because it's not like they counted themselves, right? So they have to like heard it from someone
Yes.
else. But I'm pretty sure if they have heard it from like say the chain main, then they wouldn't have these fought to begin with. So I feel like people are getting this character do more damage than X character from weird comparisons. Is they don't
From
actually
in-game
know.
comparisons.
They don't actually like know if their character damage number. I feel like people don't actually know the character damage number. They just feel like they do. They know about it.
Yeah, I mean that's just what happens when it's Genshin is not exactly a simple game. It has simple controls. This is something that we've discussed previously, but optimizing Genshin is a very complicated task. And when you have a game that is this difficult to optimize, when you have a bunch of characters who, like on paper, deal pretty similar DPS, like for example, Hu Tao VV versus Ryan National, they're pretty similar. They're both like very, very top tier in terms of single target damage, but like people will try to say like this team out damages this team or this team is better than this team, but in reality they're like what 10% apart. I mean, between like the top and the bottom team, there's much more than 10%, but still, when you're trying to compare two very good teams, they're just so close that anyone claiming to have like a concrete ability to compare the two is just lying to you because they're so close in terms of DPS that it's not like it's not DPS which is going to make the difference. It's the other factors. So it's misleading to say like Ayaka does more damage than Ganyu, or Ganyu does more damage than Ayaka, or things like that. It's because they're like pretty generally close, so you can't really make a judgment.
I feel like I say this before, but I feel like any statement that involves the word damage is automatically wrong. I know it's really hard to generalize it like that. And that's obviously a controversial take, but we're doing a controversial podcast today. But I feel like damage nowadays is not really the main factor. It's like how you dish out that damage. What other than damage can you provide? Obviously, damage is still a huge factor, right? Like if you can one-shot the enemy, then who cares? But for the most part, the quote-unquote damage in pretty much across all the character are similar and good enough that it's not the defining point of the character comparison. It's really like how this character dish out damage. Do they have easier time of dishing out that damage, or do they have say like tender elemental versus straight up miss and you do no damage? Can this character do a really good amount of burst damage upfront, potentially pushing phases on bosses type enemy and stuff? I feel like that is what really defines the character nowadays, not the quote unquote how much damage they actually do.
Yeah,
That's
so
fair. Yeah.
I talked about a concept last week that so many teams are really past the damage floor already. So many teams are already good. So many characters have come out that you can very easily craft teams that go beyond whatever the DPS floor is for clearing the abyss very easily. Like you don't have to use Bennett or Xiangling very easily. You can draft teams without them. You can draft teams without Bennett, Xiangling, Xingqiu, Venti, Kazuha. Not very hard. So a lot of times people really do get caught up in the question of whether X or Y unit is better for DPS, but in reality, they probably don't need these characters for DPS anymore. So, the end of the day, most of these kinds of conversations are probably just people who really like a character and then want to defend it, right? Typically, when people say that Ganyu is really good, maybe a person that really likes Ayaka takes it as a personal attack on like the character they like, even though the person who said they like Ganyu didn't mean to. But more specifically, I said earlier that people probably don't have the ability to give the nuanced take between units like Ganyu and Ayaka because they're so close. It's not because they're stupid, it's just that they don't really think about it, because you don't really need to. If you like Ganyu or you like Ayaka, you just pull them. But the reality is that there are specific situations where one is better than the other, and it is not always clear to people which factors kind of play into each other, right? No, and I can go over that as well.
Yeah, that's actually, I was gonna say we should actually go over it since we're on the topic, because otherwise people will get away or leave this podcast and still not knowing like what are those category. I'll get started because I'm playing Ganyu Ganyu right now on my stream, and I'm missing charge attack. So Ayaka is definitely easier to use than Ganyu by probably a good amount, because you cannot miss charge attack on Ayaka. So that's a good start.
Yeah,
I think
Ayaka is just generally. Oh, you Alexa.
I think like with the whole like that sort of thing, like you get the whole, well, Ganyu burst does a lot of damage when you have venti content because of quadratic scaling, but if you can't venti the content, you lose out on that. And while Ayaka doesn't have to deal with that, which is just flat amount, like the matchup really depends on like your enemy matchup really depends on how well your character is going to perform, and
Enemy
also
matchup is a
skill
huge
issue
one.
stuff.
Yeah, enemy matchup is actually a really huge one. For both of the character, I think I would personally say it matter a little bit more for Ayaka. I think there are more unfavorable matchup for Ayaka. Thunder Manifestation in the current Abyss is a good one. I don't know if people would know, but there's this Ambiosity clip where he just missed like 5 Ayaka bursts or something like that on the Thunder Manifestation. Like you can surely like learn enemy pattern, but it's not as easy as just hoping that or like saying like, oh, this enemy is not gonna move in this next 5-second window. In fact, I was playing with Ayaka yesterday on stream against the PMA, and I can hit majority of the burst, but I cannot really guarantee that I can hit the entire burst, because you know, like if I think, oh, he's gonna fly away in the next 2 seconds, do I hold off my burst and lose some amount of DPS uptime, or do I like fire my burst and hope that he doesn't fly away? And if he does, like if I hit 4 seconds or 5 seconds on my burst, is it good enough? There's a lot of matchup dependent stuff when it comes down to I think Ayaka more, but Ganyu, as mentioned, like Venti Ganyu is also a case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also think like with your PMA example, like if you say like you get the thing where the PMA like rockets up and you use your Ayaka burst because you thought he wasn't, well, now you just lost your burst, and that's 20 seconds where you're basically doing almost nothing. If you were Ganyu and say like you just misplayed your rotation, at least you could just shoot it and just do at least some damage. Like that's like another thing, like people have to take into account like how they dish out damage, like what you said earlier. Ayaka's all front loaded with their burst, but if your burst doesn't land, you basically do nothing. Ganyu, you can at least salvage your rotation or attempts to clear by just shooting things.
I think there's a lot of example that we can kind of go over to give people an idea. But when PMA spawn their minion, do you use your Ayaka burst or not? Because if you don't use your Ayaka burst and you charge attack, you surely you'll kill them slowly. But if you do use your burst on the minions, that leave you with no burst when he enters the vulnerability phase, which again, you also lose out the opportunity to do a bunch of damage there. Where Ganyu can just charge attack down the minions and then solely charge attack again on the actual PMA body. I think another example is the triple Maku Genki from the last Abyss. and Spectres in the current Abyss as well. Triple Maku Genki, you can't guarantee all 3 of the Maku Genki will stay in one place, so your Ayaka burst might not be able to hit all of them at once. You can do it, but it's just hard, which make it feel kind of bad when you don't actually hit all of them together, especially since Ayaka burst is actually quite small, so you do need them to be grouped up tightly. And Spectres is actually another really interesting matchup that unfavorable for Ayaka. In the most recent Vagabond and the current Abyss, I also think I have a lot of Spectres. But like Spectre is an enemy where like they don't group together at all. And so when you're playing Ayaka, do you just fire your burst on one single Spectre and then move on to the next one? Or do you like try to group them together when they don't actually group and then fire your burst on the entire them, hoping that they're group, right? So that's really bad matchup for Ayaka, for example. On the other hand, obviously Ganyu, you can just kite them, you can walk away, which make it easier to group because you just bait them into a corner, and your elemental burst and bloom are so huge that you can easily hit more of them. I don't want to say easily hit all of them, but more of them. So those are examples where matchup are unfavorable for Ayaka. I don't know if Art and Azel have anything to chip in, but I just want to make sure we're not, because I feel like I'm slanting the scale a little bit, so I want to make sure we don't do that.
Yeah, I think that one thing that is really important to mention that like is why I think Ayaka can be a lot more comfortable for a lot of people to play is it's just easier to buff 5-second burst than it is to buff like a 10-second charge attack uptime where you can't be casting other stuff. Because Ayaka, you can just press Q, swap off, like keep up VV, just press Kazua. Like you can basically guarantee your entire burst hits during Mona's Omen uptime, both with freeze extension and plus like it's 5 seconds. Things like that. So Ayaka is just easier to buff, and buffs just matter so much in this game that the ease of buffability is what I call it. Just makes Ayaka's damage like it creates the potential for her damage to be higher. However, on the flip side, you also have the fact that Ganyu, like while her charge attacks are pretty difficult to buff, you can play Morgana, and in Morgana, then you can just cast her burst and then not care and spend all of your other time just using your characters, like keeping VV uptime, buffing Ganyu. So it's really dependent on if you're doing like something where you can cast her burst a lot, you're playing Morgana, whatever. It's easy to keep buffs up on Ganyu, and it's easy to keep buffs up on Ayaka. But if you're doing something where you're maybe doing a bunch more charge attacks on Ganyu because you're not doing your Morgana rotations correctly, or maybe you're playing Melt Ganyu, then that makes it much easier to screw up your rotations. That makes it much easier to lose a lot of DPS. Like for example, the Kazuka whatever Melt Ganyu rotation with Ganyu, Bennett, Kazua, Zhongli. If you accidentally mess up like the VV on Ganyu for the VV on the
Double
cryo
sword.
VV for Ganyu's, then you do lose out on a decent bit of damage. So it's like if you screw it up with Ganyu, you lose damage, and I think it's easier to screw up with Ganyu in some playstyles.
Yeah.
So
go for it.
for me personally, I think all of these things are on the list of like there's a huge list of things that spreadsheets and DPS comparisons can't measure. On the other hand though, it's just as easy to reset your floor in the same vein that like Eula has to reset for her burst, Ayaka can reset if you miss, right? The question that I would rather ask is not about like the question I would ask is not like whether or not the units have enough damage to clear. They do. It's about if you miss a charge attack or you miss your burst, are they units that just have enough damage in general to already clear? The answer is absolutely yes. Even if you miss a burst on Ayaka, even if you lose 20 seconds at the beginning of your run, Ayaka and Ganyu are both units that definitely just have the ability to just have a fuck ton of damage, right? Their rotations don't matter as much because that's just how strong they are, right? It's not so much about how much damage they do because we all know that they can do it. It's about how easy can you really get it out, like Aza was saying. How easy can you really augment them? And in terms of like difference between Ganyu and Ayaka, I wouldn't say that they're very much different from each other. They both can utilize the same teams. Ganyu has a rotation that's a much harder, or a type of playstyle that's much harder to really say, that to really recommend. Melt specifically, but is there really that big of a difference between Ganyu and Ayaka? I mean, probably not really. So if we skip past all of that, like, what is really important about Ayaka and Ganyu? Like, at their core, like, what are the differences between Ayaka and Ganyu that we all just know but we don't think about, right? So for Ganyu, her charge attacks takes 2 seconds to fire off, meaning you need a shielder, right? Or Ayaka, she has an 80 cost burst, so you need a lot of fucking energy to get her burst back up. Things like that are much more important for a question or a comparison like this than like how much damage they do. Because let's face it, they can very easily hit over like 500,000 within like one rotation, right?
Yeah. Ayaka does have several advantages. Ease of buff is one, but it also means when things are going well for Ayaka, she often can do it really, really well. When your enemy are perfectly grouped up, and then you just, you know, like TTDS, Mona Omen, Kazua buff, and then you just burst, you can do a lot in that 5-second window during your burst. So when things are going well for Ayaka, it usually go really, really well. So that's one of the the main difference, I think, between the two characters. Ganyu doesn't really have like a super pop off cases, I think, where Ayaka, like as I mentioned, like you just boom and you call it a day if it work out, assuming.
Yeah. I mean, like, it's really like about those small differences, right? Like, because they're so similar. You guys like, not you guys specifically, but like people who are listening probably don't understand. Like, they're very, very similar units. They practically use the exact same team compositions that most people are running the exact same team compositions. Something about Mona, something about Kazua or Venti, things like that, right? Or an extra cryo unit. Almost every single variation of Ganyu and Ayaka is running this. And on top of that, they don't even have like huge weapon differences, right? They both have very strong free-to-play options. Prototype Crescent for Ganyu and the Kageuchi Amenoma for Ayaka, right? So at the end of the day, the answer is, in which situations can I really exploit them, right? So Ganyu, she absolutely excels when you can group units. If there's ever a floor where enemies are pick upable, like with a bunch of treasure hoarders, you shoot a Venti burst, you shoot Ganyu burst, and you go AFK. They'll all die, right? And for Ayaka, it's very simple. If an enemy can be frozen, or if her
you can easily hit your
if her elemental burst can get stuck on it, it's it, right? So you just have to take into account whether or not you value these situations very differently, right? And then at the very end game right now, it seems that Ayaka is much more favored. It's very easy to use Ayaka right now. It's much more rare that we get a floor that is
Venti.
significantly challenging where you have to use Venti Ganyu, because the answer typically is, if you invest your Venti enough, he'll probably do by himself. He'll probably just do it by himself, right? No. I've thought about this a lot, if you can't tell.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I feel like the only time maybe Ganyu Venti is like absolutely almost necessary is like back in the old Abyss when we had the or older Abyss cycles where we had Mirror Maiden, Sinsin Mages, and the Assassins like all at once on one floor. They typically are like spread out a lot, where if you played Ayaka, if you didn't set up instantly, they would just start teleporting, moving around, and then you're basically doomed. While with Ganyu, you just throw a Venti Q in the middle of the screen, and then they're all grouped, and you're basically dead.
How long ago was that? I actually felt like that was not that long ago, but now I realize it's probably been a while. I think ever since Raiden came out, is when we only getting heavy enemy in the Abyss.
Was this
like
before Raiden's release? I think this was like the patch before Raiden.
I think ever since Raiden, we only got heavy enemy.
Yeah, I think this might have been Kazua patch. Or no, maybe it was Ayaka's patch. I don't remember exactly. Yeah, it was probably Ayaka's patch. When we last had like that 12-3-2 with the 3 Fatuis. And then we did have like Mirror Maiden on High Tide, Low Tide, right? I don't remember exactly.
I think so.
I don't do a lot of Abyss. I
It's
just
okay.
cleared once.
Don't
and then
worry.
done.
Sumeru enemy Sasuke. I wonder if they what kind of enemy they will make, because in Sumeru we got a lot of different enemies, so I think there might be a lot of new and interesting enemy from Sumeru. Obviously, we don't know what they look like or like if they're gonna be different from the Inazuma enemy, but I think we can expect some new enemy that might also change up the again like pretty much Ganyu and Ayaka just come down to matchup, so we'll see how that goes. There was something I want to mention about. I forgot what it is. Oh yeah, something interesting I feel like is that because Morgana or Ganyu excel in doing AoE, Ganyu and Xiao are in the same vein of Abyss matchup. When the Abyss is not favorable for Xiao, it's like less favorable for Ganyu as well. That's what I felt like recently. It's like,
I mean, for Zhao specifically, whenever I find that a matchup's unfavorable, it's just if the enemies just get pushed away and don't die very quickly. Like, that's it. He does enough damage, it's just I hate what, like... He's a very interesting case. Yeah. But, I mean, there's not really much to really say about Ganyu and Ayaka. Like, they're so very similar, and the minutia between, like, okay, well, you know, if you can group enemies, Ganyu's better, but you really can't right now because most of the high floor abysses are just like 2 or 3 really tanky enemies, and Ayaka's great for that. Like, there's not really much to say. Like, they're both fine. And then if we go back in time to like the hardest events that we have, you know, a reminder that we get them literally once every like 3 months. The difficult like events are so varied, right? Ayaka or Ganyu could be the best. I mean, but like very easily Hu Tao picks up the slack and becomes better than them because typically like the super hard events just have one really tanky enemy.
yeah, something like that. I don't know. The recent Vagabond was interesting. Well, I guess both of the Vagabond have 3 enemy. The first one was like triple Kenki, Ocean Nid, and something. Oh, Geo Bishop. The second Vagabond was Spectre Room, Wolf, and PMA. So one big enemy, so Geo Bishop and PMA, and then like one medium bunch of enemies, so Magu Genki and I actually don't know. Yeah, something like that, right? Is Magu Genki medium enemy?
Like a single target enemy that is not large, I guess. I'm not really sure what you would
I don't
classify
know.
as a medium enemy.
I don't know. I don't know.
I have a
Something
Stack Symphony, that was so long ago. I don't think they were.
Oh,
I don't
anyway,
know what's happening.
let's go back to the entire Ayaka Ganyu thing. I mean, we said a lot about it already, but
Yeah. Honestly, I think it's just if you want to compare DPSs, yeah, you can make the claim. I don't necessarily think it's incorrect to say one is better than the other. I think you could make the claim that they're both better in like
different
one
categories.
situation versus the other. The reason why I personally think that Ganyu is still a valuable role is because you don't necessarily need to put her as a DPS. You can use her as a sub DPS. You can play her as like in an Ayaka Ganyu team if you want to, or you can just substitute her in for Kaio or Rosaria. Her battery capabilities aren't that great, so probably don't want to sub her in like in a Eula team because he actually needs battering there. But if we're just talking about something like a Kaio Rosaria freeze team, you could literally just sub in Ganyu and still be fine. And I think that Ganyu just has more flexibility. I honestly think Ganyu Melt is overrated. That's my personal opinion, but it's still a playstyle that does exist. It still does allow you to nuke things down very quickly. It does have that burst DPS advantage. And yeah, it's just Ganyu. You can do her as freeze. You can do her as melt. You can do her as sub DPS Ayaka. You can theoretically do as all three as well, but Ayaka melts just very, very copium because she only melts a third of her burst given her ICD. And her as a sub DPS is, you can theoretically do it, but in my opinion, I've tried both out. Ganyu is just easier to use, lower cost burst, 100% burst uptime. Ayaka, you kind of have to struggle to make work if you don't run enough ER on her as a sub DPS.
Yeah. The
Uh,
oh, go ahead.
I also like to for the whole Ganyu versus Ayaka thing. Ayaka because all of her damage is front loaded into her burst and how you can easily buff her. She doesn't really require anything in specific. Like, I made this comparison not like on other chats and whatever, but if you were to pull Ayaka on a fresh account, you basically already had a mini version of her best team. You can put TDS on Barbara, you can VV Shred with Anemo MC, and you can battery with Kaya. You essentially have like top damage team with 3 free-to-play units at the start of the game. While Ganyu, you can't really emulate that.
Well,
Which I feel like to a newer player or to someone that can't wish that often, that's a little bit more useful to them.
Yeah, I think it actually does depend. I think that if you are a person who actually knows a bit about team building, yes, you could say Ayaka is stronger just because you have access to those units, like you said. I think, though, if you're a person who literally does not know how to make teams, then Ganyu will be stronger just because Ayaka, you actually have to battery her, you actually have to freeze to make sure that things will just walk out of your burst. But Ganyu is just, you click
that's how it
and
was
hold,
all
and you can
back
do a
then.
decent amount of damage.
Like, because back then, when Ganyu first released, when we didn't really understand rotations and whatever, a lot of us just compared Ganyu's pure charge attack only damage and just saw that it was just a lot stronger than a lot of things. So if you're like less familiar with the game, like that type of character will probably be useful to you. Similar to like Zhao, where he's like a pretty one-dimensional, or has a one-dimensional like sort of way to play.
Yeah, that's fair. I think it's just as knowledge constantly evolves, we'll see different like units come into the meta, and that's just inevitable. That change will happen like that. I do think that while it's, I do think that, however, it's kind of difficult really to still make a judgment on like, we have this knowledge now, so this unit is better, because a lot of people don't have that knowledge. And for a lot of people, one unit will still be better because they just don't have the knowledge. For example, Ayaka, we now know how ER works. We know how battering works. We know how to do Ayaka freeze rotations, stuff like that. We know rotation crafting to some extent. But people who are literally like, I am just going to slap a main DPS and a healer and a shielder and like some random support that I know is a support, but I don't actually know who they're best at supporting. So let's say I'm going to take Ganyu and put Sara as a support, and then a Chi-Chi healer, and then a Noelle shielder. Like for those people, yes, Ganyu is just going to be better because you can't put together teams, and that is still a significant portion of the population. But for people who are aware of how to put together teams, Ayaka will become much stronger. So it's just hard to say at that point. It's because there's also the issue that it's not just a straight you either are knowledgeable or you are not knowledgeable. There are some people who have some knowledge of the game, but they're still struggling to put comprehensive teams together. They're still struggling to put rotations together. So for those people, it's like, well, what do we recommend? Because maybe you know enough to play Ayaka well, maybe you don't know enough to play Ayaka well. Maybe you know how to battery her, and maybe you think that you should press E and then Q on Kaya and then never battery Ayaka. It's just like, how do we make these kinds of recommendations when our audience is so distinct? They're not homogenous, I guess.
Azo, you know what I want to say to that? Oh god, you guys are not ready for this, but that is called the curse of knowledge.
Wow, Tenten.
Oh god.
Cursed.
Curse
I am
of
cursed with knowledge.
knowledge.
I mean, like, typically when people like get really mad at theory crafters, they probably are under the impression that we're like on an ivory tower because they just don't understand. But like, we also don't really make it very easy to understand because we know how complicated it is. And I don't know, it's a struggle. I mean, I don't think there's a very easy answer to it. And you know, Ganyu and Ayaka definitely fall prey to it because even now we can't really get a very good answer
Yeah,
out of any of us.
like
Like,
yeah.
even for me and Azel, who like know how much DPS they do, kind of hard to say which one's really better because of everything that we've just been talking.
Yeah, and just to clarify, I'm not trying to say like casuals are dumb or anything. Like no hate on casuals at all. I am a very casual player in some games that I play, like Terraria, FGO. I play very casually. It's just like some people don't dedicate as much time to playing a game as other people do, and the amount of dedication that you put into playing a game, like does not make you smart or dumb. It just determines how much time you have or how much time you should allocate to playing that game. And yeah, also just to like add on to that, like people don't have the knowledge thing. A lot of things that we've been hearing from TC, because we recently opened up a TC feedback channel in the Discord server, the KQM server, and a lot of people are saying like it is very difficult to get into TC because you have all this advanced knowledge on like advanced EGT, simultaneous reaction priority, how to do team count, all of these really complicated topics that we try to encourage people to do, but there aren't that many resources to actually teach people how to do them, which makes it really difficult for people to, I guess, have the same perspective that a lot of theory crafters are, just because we're kind of bad at making that kind of content, mostly because I think people don't really particularly care to do that. It's just people prefer to focus their energy on doing more work rather than making more educational content. And that's fine. Like, not everyone has to be a person who wants to teach other people how to do theory crafting. It's perfectly fine to have a large portion of the community just be focused on theory crafting itself, and then have like one or two people just communicate the results that everyone else comes up with. But we still do need those people to communicate those results, and I think that's something that we might be slacking on in a lot of instances. So I think we can improve on that. Just make it easier for people to get into theory crafting, to explain how theory crafting works and all that.
Hazel, you know what that mean?
Are you going to say curse of knowledge?
It's the curse of knowledge.
Oh
Bro.
no.
Oh
Yeah,
god.
so I mean, like, everyone engages in the game like very differently, right? So like, if someone plays very casually, they don't care about the abyss, the answer between Ayaka and Ganyu is probably very different. It is very different from like someone who's looking to min-max in the abyss, like this abyss specifically. So if you're looking for an answer from TC, like, we can give you the hard DPS numbers. Azel can give them to you, but we also still have some kind of obligation to really contextualize the numbers that we give you. Because as much as TC would love to just toss out these numbers everywhere right now, the amount of people that get like any sheet spit out, like some flat DPS number, will just run around waving it around, bonking people that have like that think otherwise, right? But like, they miss all of the knowledge that it requires to properly make an accurate evaluation.
Right.
Yeah.
I think one of Tenten.
Oh no, I was gonna say like conclusion for Ganyu and Ayaka. So because I feel like
overall.
yeah, it was just like overall like there's no like clear answer like Ganyu or Ayaka is better. They're both really good character. They're both at the top of the tier list is what I think. So like even like you see like even like if we try to list out like every pros and cons between Ganyu and Ayaka, there just isn't still a clear answer on like which one is better. Like some of it will be better in certain scenario, the other will be better because XYZ reason. I think like they're both just really good characters, and honestly I'm happy to say like there are equivalent. Like that was, if anyone were to ask me like Ganyu or Ayaka, I would just say they're equivalent. I feel like that's the best answer I can possibly give. Which is the overall.
I mean, the answer is just as usual. It depends. And I know that's not really a satisfactory answer to a lot of people. They want to hear a clear, like, this character is better than this other character. But it's just, these characters are, there are so many factors that go into making a DPS character good or a DPS character bad. You have support alliance, buff ability, like ease of use, burst DPS. And all of these things factor in. And sometimes you might value one thing more than another. So, for example, maybe you want a character who can play at a range because you want to have a character who can counter really like wacky content like the Thunder manifestation. And Ganyu is better in those cases. But let's say like this account already has a ranged character in the form of Yoimiya or something. In that case, then maybe Ganyu is less valuable. And it's just, there are so many factors that you need to take into account whenever you are recommending X or Y. That's really difficult to just say, this character better than this one, roll for this one, or this character better than this other one, roll for this one. So yes, it depends.
Yeah.
It's very hard to impart that kind of knowledge onto someone else.
Curse of
like
knowledge.
like we don't really like, you wouldn't want someone to walk around just telling you down like, oh, you should have pulled for X unit because of blah blah blah. Like I said earlier, people engage with the game completely differently, right? If there's someone who wants to learn how to like theorycraft or learn how to optimize their stuff, then yeah, that's fine. But most people probably don't have like the proper insight to know that like, okay, you really should not go around telling your friends how to play optimally if they are only on Genshin just because they like how Jean looks, right? It's very different.
Oh,
You're just
yeah.
gonna get a who Omega will asked from those people if
Yeah.
you try to explain.
And then
Who
they'll
asked?
like, I'm gonna give you advice right now. Just don't do that for people in general, right? If like your friends don't really care that much and they're enjoying their time, they're not worse than you for it. They just play the game differently. Maybe they're super engaged about other games and you don't care about that. They probably shouldn't berate you for it either. So there's your life advice for this
Yeah.
podcast.
Also,
so-
reverse.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah, I was just gonna say, also applies to the reverse. If someone you know likes doing theory crafting, don't shit on them for it. At everyone who likes to shit on theory crafters, please don't. We're not saying that you can't pull for waifu. We just like playing the game in a different way.
I can't play a game without mid-maxing. It's just me, but anyway, yeah.
Wow.
I forgot what we were gonna talk about after that. So, because I'm updating our topic sheet right now.
Ganyu and
I did
Zhongli.
want. Yeah, Zhongli is coming up. Ganyu and Zhongli, and I think they're both very strong characters.
I feel
and
like we
people are probably wondering like
talked about
to
this last
go for one
podcast
or the
already,
other.
though.
We
I-
did cover it briefly. I don't think we covered it that in depth.
In depth.
Yeah,
I mean, we already.
I do because
talked
there
about-
are a lot of things that I think that people miss on Zhongli. Even theory crafters. I think there are a lot of misconceptions about Zhongli. I personally think that Zhongli is stronger than a lot of people give him credit for, because I think people don't realize how big of an effect rotations change when you need to extend them slightly. Like me increasing my rotation length by 2 seconds is a massive difference in rotation DPS. And if Zhongli can save you that 2 seconds because his shield makes it so that you just don't have to dodge, where he saves you 4 seconds because you don't get interrupted and then you don't have to dodge afterwards, then that's going to be very, very helpful. But that also depends on you actually playing a character who can lose a lot of DPS if they get interrupted, or lose a lot of DPS if they have to dodge. So, for example, Reverse Melt with Kai, Rosario, Xiangling, Bennett, probably doesn't care about Zhongli at all because Xiangling's Pyronado keeps spinning regardless of if you're dodging if you're on the ground interrupted, whatever. So that's like a team that doesn't care about it. Meanwhile, you have like Ganyu, and if you get interrupted in your 2-second charge up time, then you're just screwed. So she's a character, like especially in Ganyu Melt, who would care about Zhongli a lot. So Zhongli's value is not just account dependent; he's also team dependent. Like what teams you play, because I think we all like to say like Zhongli just makes her clears more comfortable, and that's true for some teams. Zhongli does make clears for some teams more comfortable, but for others, he just like makes nearly zero difference, and for some teams, he makes like a world of difference. So it kind of just depends.
I think on building on top of that, but also like another point, for characters like Zhao, where there is no easy access to a Nemo Shred, he is the best option. Like, playing Zhao without Zhongli, you run the risk of getting interrupted mid-plunge, which destroys your damage. It actually destroys your DPS. On top of him getting himself low while you're fighting, and then if you don't have a C4 gene, you don't have any way to lower the enemy Anemo resistance. So your damage is set.
Yeah.
There is a reason why the Xiao people recommend rolling Zhongli.
I think it's
The
just
Xiao mains guide.
team dependent. I mean, I already pushed the video on when you shouldn't roll for Zhongli. In that specific video, I pretty much just said like if you have a reason to roll for Zhongli, for example, if your team want a Zhongli, then that's good enough. Like if your team want a Zhongli, honestly, it's good enough. Just roll for Zhongli. But of course, the other hand is if your team doesn't care for a Zhongli, then there's no reason to roll for Zhongli. Like that's pretty much it. Which is a little bit contradicting to the usual some of the idea like, oh, Zhongli is always good in every single scenario because he just make you comfy, which that one aspect I disagree. And
Yeah, I think like
yeah, the biggest thing for me, especially with the team I play and the team I think people should play, is that National and Freeze team does not use Zhongli, and I feel like in every single Abyss so far, it's been proven that some kind of National plus Freeze team is the meta. Either Ayaka or Ganyu. I guess more Ayaka nowadays, which we just talked about. But you would just run a Freeze, Ayaka on one side, and you run like some kind of Banish Channeling on the other side, which means you don't have a position for Zhongli. Obviously, that is the top of the meta, and you don't always have to play for the top of the meta. But speaking from pure meta perspective, in that case, Zhongli doesn't have a position to fill right now. Is the biggest thing about I think have with Zhongli.
Yeah, I mean, you can theoretically use Zhongli in like Hu Tao Double Geo, and Hu Tao Double Geo is honestly like a very comfortable comp to play. Super good against single target. It makes Hu Tao's cancels easier to do because you have a shield. You don't have to worry about getting interrupted. Things like that. So he does have a place in those teams. The issue with his place in those teams, I think, is there aren't a lot of teams where you pick Zhongli over everything else. I think like the best three examples are Ganyu Melt, Hu Tao Double Geo, and Xiao.
Yep.
And other than that, there's honestly like not that many uses where Zhongli is like best in SWAT. And yeah, those three teams are actually like pretty good. So the fact that he is best in SWAT for those three teams is still definitely something that's really good for him. But I think just when you compare Zhongli to other supports and how many times they're best in SWAT, so like Xingqiu, best in SWAT in deal with Vape, best in SWAT in Cleave Vape, best in SWAT in Hu Tao VV Vape, arguably best in SWAT for a lot of Freeze teams, best in SWAT for basically every single team which requires Hydro application, like Taser. There are just so many teams in which these supports are optimal, and when you just compare that to Zhongli, who has 3, it's just not that significant, I think.
If you want a Hydro character and you can use Xingqiu's, the answer is use Xingqiu's. Like the end.
Hazel forgetting about Yoimiya?
Oh yeah, that's also a good point, I guess. You can say Yoimiya. Wow,
Yoimiya, a guide writer, by the way.
Yoimiya, you're about to drown Tenten. Oh,
I'm
never
not.
mind.
I'm not.
Have you said Chongling 50 times yet?
I think we're pretty close. I think people are counting. I think we're at like
Oh, no.
25 channeling mention.
I mean, you said 12 before we started, so we just need like
maybe
30,
someone in the
38
comment
more.
can tell us how many channeling we said in this stream.
Shouting.
Okay.
Selling. Just
No,
national.
I don't have much to say about Strong. I feel like we talk about this like every single podcast. The answer is, if you need him, grab him. If you think you need him, grab him. He's never going to be like a horrible pull. He's just not terribly efficient over your other options.
He's not
He's
efficient,
very safe,
but
he's
yeah.
very comfortable. If you value that, go ahead. There's nothing wrong with it.
Yes. Okay. Next topic that we want to talk about was just Amos and Vortex. Terrible banner. Don't roll. That's my opinion on it.
It's such a bad banner, man. Like, you have a standard weapon that 2 characters can use, and then you have a spear that is just worse than other alternatives for almost every character. Dude, even MiHoYo knew they messed up because on Zhongli's second banner, on his trial, he had Homa instead of Vortex.
Oh my god.
Pepe laugh.
Like,
MiHoYo Pepe.
the banner is so bad.
Mhm.
Yeah, don't roll the
Yeah.
end.
Don't roll the end. Yes. I mean, like, I think people will say like, well, for Ganyu, Amos is so good, but you have access to Prototype Crescent. You can refine it up pretty high, and it's honestly not too far behind Amos. And you can refine it up pretty high. It does have the issue of headshotting. Yeah.
I think Amos is so overrated, to be honest.
Yeah, but it is pretty overrated.
It's
It's
good.
so easy to use. Okay, hey,
Yeah.
Okay, it is easy to use.
have you ever experienced Amos?
No.
The difference between
Yes.
an Amos bow and a Prototype Crescent might not be huge with refinements, but I don't have to hit headshots anymore. Okay.
Well, that just sounds like skill issue to
Whoa,
me.
but
Well,
That's
hey,
true.
if things are floating around in a venti burst, I'm not hitting a headshot. Okay.
but you also have to
And
you also
if
have
I'm
to
on
consider
mobile,
like
I'm also not hitting a headshot.
there's also a lot of
That's
other
fair.
5-star weapon that you can use. Like Amos is not the only 5-star weapon that you can use on Ganyu. You can use Thundering Pulse, you can use Skywhip, you can use Polar Star.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that people have this misconception that Amos is just always gonna be best in slot for Ganyu, which is just not true.
It's not true.
If you look at the math, Polar Star is very, very slightly behind Amos, like 1,000 DP damage per rotation. Out behind
Yeah, but
Amos. It's like
Amos
tiny
looks cool.
because Amos has attack percent substat, and that just
Very
does not
good.
work well in Melt. And Freeze, in Morgana team specifically, you're not doing a large portion of your damage is not charge shots, it's actually
Burst
your
damage.
burst, in which case Amos just matters less. You can use Thundering Pulse, or you can use Skyward Harp if your crit rate allows for it. So, yeah, Amos it's overrated. You can get it on standard. There's no reason to roll for it on the limited banner when your other alternative is Vortex, which is just honestly kind of a terrible weapon. Sorry to that person who posts on every single Genshin Impact Twitter post about how they want Vortex, but yeah, it's kind of bad. So
Yeah, I think Amos is overrated by a lot of people. It's just it's still a 5-star weapon you can use on Ganyu, but honestly, it's not that far ahead of if it's even ahead of other weapon 5-star weapon specifically. And there's also Prototype percent. In fact, I think for Freeze Ganyu, Amos is arguably like not even as good as many of the other 5-star weapon.
Yeah, it's just straight up not. If you have the crit distribution to allow for Polar Star or to allow for Skyward Harp, because they do have a crit rate substat, which does make it difficult to use with Blizzard Strayer because you're already getting 40% plus 15% from prior resonance plus like your base 5%. So you really can't have too many crit rate subs, or else you're just like those just go to waste. But if your crit distribution allows for it, Polar Star and Skyward Harp will just straight up outperform if you have enough enemies. And even if you don't have too many enemies and they're not grouped up specifically, they're still very close to Amos. And the second thing is that Thundering Pulse exists, and you just don't need to care about your crit distribution because it's got crit damage substat, not crit rate substat. And that's just great. So yeah, Amos overrated, and you can also get it on standard.
And
So
Vortex
don't do it.
bad. Yes.
Vortex
Emos.
bad.
I feel like Emos overrated. Any input
Yes.
from the creator of Milk Ganyu?
Dude, I'm looking at Art's transcript right now, and it's just artisans. It's so easy to use though. If you're on mobile, you don't need to hit headshots anymore. 10/10/Azel sounds like a skill issue.
Skill.
I mean, it's true. I mean, what else do you want me to say? Like, it's very easy to use. That's it. Like,
Yeah,
there's
that's true.
there's not much more value than that. Like, if you have any other 5-star bow, you don't need it. That's how good the 5-star bows are. The bows are actually kind of cracked. But is it worth? Like, is Amos worth risking pulling Vortex Vanquisher on?
No.
Okay, well, let's go into it. Is
That's-
Vortex Vanquisher good? Is there any character in the game that really wants Vortex Vanquisher? Hold on, everyone, hold on. Gathering your thoughts.
Can we?
Not really. Sorry, I can't.
Art gave us a very long time to gather our thoughts.
I mean, you can use it on Zhao.
Yeah, I mean you can.
Yeah, but
why would
Jade
you
is
just-
on standard.
Yeah.
Jade's on standard. Plus, just go for Homa. Just use Homa.
So,
to-
please
to
don't
pull for
like-
Vortex for Seattle.
I have like another thing about the bow stuff. Are you really gonna risk 3 pities for a bow?
That's on
Like-
standard banner.
Yeah, that's on standard. And it's like
Yes,
it's not like
I
the
would do
other
it.
weapon is like usable, right? Like if say like we were going back all the way to Redhorn Harp banner, if you wanted Harp, you could go for it because Redhorn is a decent weapon on everyone else. You're not using Vortex on anyone. You're just not.
Yeah. I would also I think a lot of people might not think of this, but 2 of the best polearm units are Xiangling and Hu Tao. And you know what Xiangling does? She gets run with Bennett, except for Sukokumon. Have to add that. She gets run with Bennett in most of her teams. That gives her a significant attack steroid, which decreases the value of attack percent because the more that you get of a stat, the less percentage damage increase overall that you're going to get from further increases in that stat. So attack percent, not that great on Xiangli because she already has Bennett. She has 4-piece Noblesse that Bennett uses. And if you're running her with Sucrose, you have TTTS, whatever. And then you have Hu Tao. And Hu Tao gives herself like 1,000 attack from her elemental skill, in which case then you also don't want any further attack percent, which makes the attack percent stuff that you get from Vortex just super copium. Like Vortex, I'm pretty sure is just straight up worse than 4-star options for both of them.
That's +2 mentioned, by the way.
So yeah,
+2
so-
Xiangling.
yeah,
And then
terrible.
for the
I mean,
other
like
one-
yes, Xiao exists, but yeah.
Yeah, the other polearm units are Zhao and
Zhongli.
Shenhe and Zhongli. Zhongli runs a
Shenhe? Oh yeah.
blue spear for HP percentage. Zhao
China use
good
engulfing
get a
lightning. Yeah.
and then Shenhe uses engulfing lightning because the energy is okay. Actually, on the topic of spears, it's not just Hoba anymore. I would say engulfing lightning is like so jacked out of its
Yeah.
mind.
There's like 2 characters in the game that don't actually want or use engulfing lightning, but they also have other really cracked alternatives. Like Homa for Zhao and Hu Tao, you can just use it. While every other spear basically or polearm basically wants or can use engulfing lightning to a decent degree.
Yeah.
You already have Zhongli.
They're still the best weapon. Though.
Zhongli's best weapon. Zhongli, you get his best weapon while rolling for other weapons. It's fine.
You get his best weapon when you're rolling on banners because his best weapon is Black Tassel. Don't at me. Just kidding.
That's pretty much it.
But also on the thing with spears, like Shenhe can use Serpent Spine. Or not Serpent Spine, Skyward Spine, which you lost the 50-50 or lost the weapon banner, you might have. So you don't even
Imagine
need a full
ever
Vortex.
losing the weapon banner.
You know what I think they should do?
But yeah.
You know, you guys play Minecraft, right? You guys know the item frame?
No.
I feel like they should add an item frame in your teapot. So if you ever get a Vortex Vanquisher, it has a purpose. You just put it in your item frame.
You
in
just
the
show it off in an item frame
Well,
and then just leave
The
it.
teapot now has like you can show off some screenshots.
Yeah, but you can show off your item. Like they need item frame, so like NV can show off his Skyward Play. Or Pry, sorry. And play.
Skyward Pride Smoge. I just want something where I can show off my Aquila Favonia that I have no use for.
And then Slice can put his level 90 belt on the item frame. Poggers. he has a level 90.5 belt. I don't know why, but he has a level 90.5 belt.
I mean,
like a Giga Chat
that's it. I mean, spears are very, very much. Dude, Vortex Vanquisher is just so bad. Stop. Don't even think about it, boys. Don't even think about it. It's not worth it. Amos is not worth it.
Think
Wait
about
for
the
a
worst
better
case
banner, boys.
scenario.
You
Think
want?
about the worst case
you know what?
scenario. You pull Vortex, you kill another Vortex, you get Amos finally due to fate points. You use your free wishes from the BP, and you get an Amos from standard.
Like
R2 Amos, very good.
it really, like right now, it really is just like if you're talking about 5-star spears, it's really like the engulfing lightning and Hobo show. Like that's it. For swords, it's Mist Splitter. It's not even really just Mist Splitter.
Mist Splitter and Jade, yeah.
Jade Cutter is also pretty good, but
Yeah. Freedom
Mist
Sworn, you
Splitter.
have a use for Kazua, but Freedom Sworn, it's kind of more of a niche case, but if you have Kazua, it's very good.
for bows, like all of them are good, and you don't need
Sky,
the
yeah.
Amos.
Scattered Harp,
Literally, yeah,
Polar Star,
literally-
Thundering Pulse.
literally all of them are pretty good. And did I miss one for? Oh yeah, for Catalyst. Well, they all suck, so you just use.
No.
Tails.
You use the donut, best weapon.
TTDS.
Stop.
All right, so like the
That's pretty much it for the Vortex Vanquisher.
it's actually
Just-
quite interesting that we don't have a good Catalyst yet, but we can save that for whenever
TTDS?
Catalyst.
Oh, you
comes
mean
out.
like
Whenever a new catalyst comes out, Sasuke.
Sasuke? It's okay. I mean, if you guys think Yamiko would be a Callous user and you think she would just hold TTDS like everyone else,
That'd be so funny.
that'd be so funny, wouldn't it? If Yamiko end up being a TTDS holder.
That's if her damage is that low.
I mean,
Okay.
but TTDS is so good too. It depends on her
It
team,
would be
right?
funny.
It
would
depends
be
on her
very
team,
funny.
right?
It would be extremely funny.
Like if you put
But
Yai with Beto together, isn't it TTDS? It would
We'll
be
have
so
to see.
funny. It would be so funny, dude.
that would be hilarious. Okay,
It would be
let's.
hilarious.
What other topics do we have?
Ganyu fall off.
I feel like we can go back to Ganyu if you want.
I feel like we already talked about
I mean, we
it.
kind of basically already
Yeah.
covered it. Yes,
Yeah, we
she
basically
has
covered it.
because of changes in content. More single targets equals less Ganyu effectiveness.
Sorry for the people that everyone actually can't see our topic list. The question that we had written down was, why do people think that Ganyu's fallen off, and what factors made her less good compared to other DPS units? And to reiterate, people think she's fallen off for sure because Ayaka's come out. And the factors that really make her less good is that one, Ayaka's extremely good against most of the abysses now. And yeah, that's it. It's just Ayaka's also good.
Yeah,
Huh?
I think that's it. I don't think Ganyu
Get
has
both Giga Chad.
fallen off at all. Just really
Yeah.
like alternative. I mean, back then Ganyu was really like a league
Yeah.
of her own, and now you have another one.
Yeah,
That's it.
fallen off, boys. It just she has like what it's very hard to miss the DPS floor with Ganyu. She's definitely fallen off, guys. I don't get it. It's just there's so
It's-
many units
yeah.
that you can use, so many units that you can pull for, so many team compositions that you can experiment with. Why get caught up on whether or not one is better than the other so badly? Just play what you want. It's
like
nice to know, but do you really know why? Do you understand why? That's what theory crafting is really about. Not really too much about our team DPS calcs.
Mhm.
it's more. It's not like Ganyu got weaker. It's more so everyone else is on par
Also
with her.
strong. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we found out things to make other units stronger. We
Oh, to
did
be
not find
honest,
those
like
things.
what units were really around back then that we knew about when Ganyu came out? Like
The
Xiangling was
Luke.
just
The
Xiangling
Luke.
was like our best DPS was Diluc, and Xiangling was barely just beginning to come together, and like Sucre's Taser was also just beginning to become a thing, right? So Ganyu really kind of kicked the door open in terms of DPS because we were all so bad at the game.
I mean, Sucre's Taser, it wasn't even for DPS. It was just a random team people came up with to get around the shields in the Ultimus. And then we were like, wait, but it's actually good for DPS.
We literally just found some video on Bilibili of some guy murdering stuff with Mona, and we are like, what if we use Sucres instead? And that's it.
Telephone pole razor.
Razor is
Oh
the
my
best
god.
DPS in the game. Don't at me.
Telephone Raider. I remember that one.
There's my mention of Razor for this podcast. Whoever keeps commenting in the YouTube comments, TC podcast checklist. Azel mentions Razor. There you go. Razor mentioned. There you go.
Bingo! Someone won.
I'm pretty sure part of the checklist is Changling mentioned. How many are we at right now? Anyone?
Probably around 40.
I don't think we have anything else, right?
We can talk about Fab Weapon real quick. We didn't get to that last podcast, but
Yeah. So the like engulfing lightning and Favonius weapons in general. So like, so recently, not very recently, but a long time ago, we really thought about like energy and energy recharge. Like, how does it play into impacting like DPS comparisons and stuff like that? Like, since you have to allocate points into energy recharge, because obviously, you know, your units can't just fire off elemental burst without end. And some units have more costly energy bursts and stuff like that. We thought to ourselves, like, how much does it really impact our DPS? And recently we had the ability to really check out our calcs and stuff like that, and we found that Favonius weapons and weapons that have energy recharge in general, but specifically the Favonius weapons and engulfing lightning, they were increasing our ceilings by quite a bit, or making it very, very easy for teams to have higher ceilings, right? And that's because the energy recharge that you would have allocated in their stats can go into crit or attack because you get so much more energy from the Favonius weapons or engulfing lightning.
Yeah. I think that there's kind of a weird dichotomy sometimes in TC though. Favonius weapons are very, very strong, but they're also not strong just because they increase your sheet DPS. I think people have the misconception that it only increases your sheet DPS, which is why Favonius weapons are good. That's not necessarily true. One of the bigger reasons why Favonius weapons are so good is because they allow you to fix screwed up rotations. So let's say you accidentally misbatteried with like Xingqiu and you have a Fab weapon on him. If you had anything other than a Fab weapon on him, you would just have to wait 20 seconds for your next skill to come up, or 21 seconds. But with Fab weapons, you can just auto a couple times, fill up the rest of your burst if you're close, and then your rotation is fixed, which is another reason why Fab weapons are so strong.
I'm running Fab everything nowadays. If there's a support character in my party, it's running Fab. Chunha, Fab. Rosaria, Fab. Bennett, Fab. I don't know. Like, I feel like nowadays, just run Fab on your support. Like, don't actually care about running anything.
Yeah. Like, I also like to mention, like, Fab also compared to Sac, there's a huge thing with Xingqiu. But recently we didn't find out till relatively recently, because Sac back then was just like, oh, just use it on Xingqiu, fixes energy, blah blah blah. But if you have enough ER with Fab and you can get the proc off during the single hit E or the single E, it is actually a damage increase over Sac just because your rotation is shorter. That one E cast is actually increasing your DPS or decreasing your DPS like overall.
Okay, but like, if I see a fat 20k twice, bro, that's pretty sick.
Yeah, it's so sick.
I'm using my sack
Yeah,
sword
but
on my Xingqiu. You can suck my balls.
I do the double thing also. Bennett E double.
Yeah, double vape
Shincho.
Shinshu so sick. It's like
But
just
like
good burst
for
damage.
characters like Hu Tao, you basically just want Fab. Because you
I don't
weren't going
know.
to nuke E anyways.
Fab's just so good. I've been digging Fab Bennett like recently. It's so good, and it helped battery my Xiangling. Oh, that's a +1. But yeah, I don't know. Like, is there a support that you don't run Fab on? Venti probably run Fab, to be honest. If you don't have
You
allergy,
can run Fab.
I think Fab Venti is like, what else would you run on
Okay.
Venti, right? Stringless. It's nice to increase damage, but I feel like Fab just make everything more comfortable on Venti himself, more comfortable for your entire party. Fab. Oh, speaking of Fab, sorry, Azo, you're gonna say something, right? Do you want to go first, or?
I was just gonna say Kazua. You can run Fab.
But
Fab on
Kazua is so
Kazua
sick.
and Fab on Bennett
Sak
is
Kazua is so
actually
sick.
pretty good if your ER is very your ER requirements are really high. So for example, Ganyu Melt. I was doing like calculations on Ganyu Melt yesterday, and then I was trying to put in like the alley flash, and it was just so scuffed because I couldn't get the ER high enough to actually meet the ER requirement that I had on Bennett because it was like 266% because you use one holy in that rotation. I was like, wait, what if I just use a Fab weapon? It did decrease the DPS, but it honestly wasn't that big of a DPS decrease, like maybe 2,000, 3,000 damage over the rotation, like probably around 2,000,
You guys
which
know what you should do.
out of like 30, 40,000 is not actually that big. So Fab on Bennett, Fab on Kazua, not bad, pretty sick. Iron Sting is still better on Kazua if you can meet your ER needs. Fab is actually not that high on Kazua's weapon rankings, but Kazua's weapon rankings are all very close in terms of team DPS, except for Freedom Sword. Freedom Sword is just in leagues above everything else, but then everything else is pretty close. So you can run Fab. It's more comfortable, definitely.
You know what the thing is?
I mean,
Oh, go ahead.
go ahead.
Oh, alright, you guys ready? Iron String's overrated on Kazua.
Rude.
Hello. Every time.
You know what? I think the best weapon for Kazua is Dark Iron Sword.
Every time we talk about, or every time someone talk about Kazua, the first response is always, "Wait, why aren't you running Iron String?" I feel like people have this idea like Iron String is just the best of Kazua because it's the 4-star crappable that give EM. But honestly, like Iron String is pretty bad when you don't have enough ER. I'd much rather run Sak and Fab.
Sak and Fab are both much more comfortable to run. On like paper, if you're doing your rotations perfectly, Iron Sting is higher damage, yes, but Fab allows you to like battery Xiangling if you accidentally miss battery once, and allows you to keep your rotation consistent. Yeah. So it's much more comfortable to run. Allows for patching up of skill issue.
What you guys need to do?
I'm kidding.
When you're playing Melt Ganyu, you guys should run Fab Bennett, Fab Xiangling, Fab Zhongli.
Yeah,
honestly,
so what
not
I was
even
gonna
that
say
idea.
is that like, if a team has enough DPS, like, you know, the difference between like an Iron Sting or a Favonius weapon is probably really low, right? Not like super high, like maybe like 2,000, right?
Yeah, I'm
Is
looking
that
at it
2,000
right
DPS
now.
really going to matter? You have 1.5 minutes to clear the abyss on your side, but if your Favonius weapon can give you enough energy to move on to your next rotation much quicker than just sitting around and doing nothing, it's almost always worth it. And in general, people don't really optimize their energy recharge very well. It's just like something we do for our sheets. So it's it's a very hard thing to measure, right? You can't just say, yeah, if you run a Favonius weapon everywhere, you'll always be comfortable. Okay, well, maybe you might not be in a position where your artifacts are good enough to do that. Maybe running a Homa over a Favonius lance is the difference between you clearing and not. But for someone else that has like jacked out Crimson Witch of Flames, maybe they don't give a shit. And running a Favonius weapon is how you get through things, right? So that's kind of like what I was gonna say. Like DPS is like kind of important, kind of not, but in this specific situation, energy and stuff like that interfaces with DPS in a much more complex way than just saying, if you use a Favonius weapon, you get more ER but less damage. That's not really what matters. Can you still clear the Abyss with it? Can you clear more comfortably with it? Those are like the questions you should really be asking and answering.
Yeah. Another thing that I think we should mention about energy, like you mentioned, people are terrible at optimizing their ER. And one other thing is, I think that people should generally build more than whatever ER requirements is generally recommended. So, for example, Xiangling, you see like 180% is the general recommendation. But what if you mess up? What if human error is a thing? Then, if you don't have enough ER, you're going to have to wait for the next Bennett E. You're extending your rotation by 4 seconds. May not sound like that long, but it's quite a big DPS decrease to go from a 24 to a 28-second rotation on Child, for example. So, you should generally invest enough so that you can account for human error, rather than just have to suffer through like having to live with your mistakes and those mistakes costing you a lot of damage. Plus, there's the issue that SRL mentioned this to me, and I think he just posted in TC Gen. But this is a significant problem with the Genshin sim, which actually just generates particles randomly according to whatever rate they are generated in game. So, for example, Fischl generates, I think, like 0.6. Each of her Oz hits has a 0.6 chance to generate a particle. I think it might be 0.7 actually, but something like that. And how we treat those in energy recharge calcs is we just say, okay, every single hit generates 0.7 particles, but that's not what actually happens. You could be unlucky and just every single time Oz hits, he just doesn't generate a particle, or he only generates a particle like 40% of the time or 50% of the time, as opposed to 70% of the time. In that case, if you're using the ER requirements that are recommended, then you're going to have an issue because sometimes you're just not going to have enough ER. So you should generally build like 10-20% more ER than is recommended if you want to clear comfortably, just because extending the rotation is so painful. Like for Bennett, I gave the example of a 4-second extension, and maybe that doesn't sound that bad. But now imagine you're battering with Goro in an Ito team or something, and you have to go like how you have to wait for 10 seconds for Goro's E to be back up. Then you're extending your rotation by quite a lot, by 10 seconds, as opposed to just 4. So it's just painful, and you should just probably run a bit more ER just to be safe, so you don't have to deal with those issues.
Bennett elemental skill
think that-
just busted. Low cooldown.
I think that I think that also factors in with the enemies. Like a lot of people run Morgana into those heavy, small trash mobs type stuff, and in that team or in those scenarios, you're gonna get a lot of energy just from killing enemies. But on paper, a 15-second or like 18-second Morgana rotation has some of the highest ER costs in the game. Mona is almost impossible with the KQM calc standards to like reach. Like it's almost impossible to reach her ER requirement without Fav, like just the Fav as an ER SAM. But when you're playing in that type of content where Morgana excels in, you get the energy just because you're just killing things. And like, say like if we bring it to a more recent example to the Wolf Abyss, where it's just a bunch of wolves on both sides, they drop no particles, no clear particles. So if you didn't meet the energy requirement, you just didn't play because you couldn't.
Yep. I remember playing against Magu Kenki. I was playing like Child International on the Magu Kenki side with Child Xiangling, Bennett, Kazua, and I just threw my Xiangling's ER to like 230% just because Kenki just was not dropping enough particles for me to consistently get Xiangling's burst back up. I was like, I don't want to deal with this. I'm just going to run more ER on Xiangling. Yes, probably it's like 10% DPS loss. I don't care. I just want to have my burst up more often. It's just easier.
Yeah, I actually saw this calc a while back, and that was it was from CN. And for people who doesn't know, CN usually do calc really differently from how KQM does it. The biggest difference is they always assume signature weapon instead, so refine one, which dramatically changes a lot of the calc because certain characters just have way better signature weapon than other. Miss Bitter is one of them, for example, and Homa is like another. But
Deal
interestingly
with
enough,
wolf scrapes.
yeah, interestingly enough, there was this.
I'm saying that's
4-star
terrible for him, by the way.
Oh. Interestingly enough, there's this calc that for 4-star weapon, if you're only using 4-star weapon, Ayaka Ganyu is actually better than Ayaka Tenten because you run Faf Ayaka.
Fab Ayaka.
So it was Ayaka Ganyu is the way to go if you only have 4-star weapon and you just run Fab Ayaka to battery both Ayaka and Ganyu. That was the calc, which is a really interesting take. But Fab weapon is just so strong that like is actually
sounds like an interesting take to me.
Yeah.
I would like to
that
see
sounds like such a
for that.
weird way
Yeah.
to evaluate you. Like, why would you not use Ame Noma Kageuchi there? It's just so weird to me.
It is weird. But
Mm.
it just
Are you saying that KQM theory crafting is just better than CN theory crafting?
well
I'll take that as a yes. Thank you,
I
Tenten.
agree.
All right, moving on.
no,
KQM
but
is
Kageuchi
there.
doesn't battery
anything-
Ganyu, so you just use Fab to
Yeah,
battery.
just
Ganyu.
get good.
Okay,
No,
well,
I would
oh my
if
God.
I would have to do that, it would just be Mona. The team was like Ayaka, Mona, Ganyu, Kazua, right? Or is it something else?
I don't know. I think it might be Kazua instead of Venti, because otherwise, if it was Venti, then you just don't care about like if you have Venti, then you shouldn't have ER issue.
I mean, yeah, if you have Venti, you just cryo absorb and then you reduce your requirements by 15 flat for everyone, and it's much easier. If you do Kazua, though, I would just run Fab on Kazua, Fab on Mona.
But
I know people want to say like prototype Amber on Mona so that you can have healing. I care about having my burst up so things die before they can hit me rather than being able to heal, but also like kind of a whale take, so fair enough.
I think the thing about that though is like, if you're gonna run a freeze team, you're gonna have Blizzard Strayer, but EM does nothing for freeze, so you only have like 4 useful subs anyway, so you're gonna get ER anyway.
Well, hopefully,
Mm.
that's like
Because
That's-
like you have, because most freeze is the only element, or I guess Geo to an extent, that EM is just
And
dead.
crystallize is very useful. What do you mean?
crystallize. That's I actually do want to talk about this topic, and that is why Xiangling have better artifact than other character. I feel like this is pretty uncommon knowledge, and while we're
yeah,
on
this
the,
is something that we did talk about.
on the topic of knowledge, we
and
might
it's
as well
not
talk
just-
about it, right? Why Xiangling have better damage than your other character?
Well, it's Xiangling, Hu Tao, Noel, Ito, but you can just say Xiangling because you are the Xiangling salesman.
No. I'm talking about EM, like how like she have better artifact substat than other character. 'cause-
Yeah. I'm saying like Hu Tao also has
Wait,
that.
but
because
how,
Hu Tao
wait, how
also
does
has
Noel
that
and Ito
for
has it though?
They have defense because they benefit from both defense and attack. So
Is-
technically,
is it-
Xiangling has the most, but
Yes.
they all, but
Actually,
Noel, Ito.
Raiden is the
They
most
also have a lot.
efficient character for stats.
Really?
No
Is it?
EM, just max out ER with engulfing lightning, and you're ready and good to go.
No, I mean like how many useful
Like
subs you have.
usable stat.
Oh.
Yeah, usable stat.
Yeah, like
so,
out of 10.
So let me explain. What does this mean? So, and ironically speaking, your Xiangling have better artifact than most of your other characters, which is one of the reasons why she just does more damage. The reason is because Xiangling can use more stats than other characters, which is namely EM and ER. When you get a good artifact and like doesn't always roll into crit, right? Sometimes you get attack, sometimes you get ER, sometimes you get EM. For Xiangling, ER is a really good stat because her burst does cost a lot and it further amplifies the bomb set. But more importantly, she used EM extremely well. Elemental Mastery is honestly arguably better than crit until a certain point, which means if you somehow roll into a lot of EM, it's actually a good thing. So it just means that you have more chances of getting really good substat, and on average, you will have more substat on your Xiangling than other characters, which just means she's stronger.
Yeah, this is something that we account for in the KQM standards. I'm not sure who originally brought this up, but we were like, what if we just give every single sub 2 flat subs just to account for the fact that some characters just will benefit more from random rolls that aren't into crit than from other ones. So Xiangling is example, benefits from ER, EM, attack, crit rate, crit damage, flat attack. Then you have Hu Tao, benefits from attack. I mean, like, she benefits more from some of these than others, of course, but Hu Tao benefits from attack, flat HP, HP percent, crit rate, crit damage, and EM.
Yeah.
Then you have like Ito benefits from defense, attack, crit, and Noelle, same thing for defense.
Yeah.
But not for EM.
On the other hand, like,
and then you compare, yeah, and then you have to compare that to like cryo freeze units who really only benefit from crit damage.
yeah. On the other hand,
Yeah,
like,
it's bad.
character that doesn't benefit as much from self start are harder to get or harder to make good of. So
Yeah.
like, because you have to
hard
roll
to
specific-
farm good artifacts for.
Yeah.
How many of us like you stay in Blizzard Stray for 10 years because you can't get because you can only get like 2 or 3 subs
Not me.
compared to
I'm done. I'm done with fucking Blizzard
I'm
Stray.
kinda
compared to
done.
like a Crimson Witch kind of like user where they can basically use anything but defense.
You can roll attack sense on Xiangling. You can roll EM sense on Xiangling.
no,
you can
no.
roll
You
ER
can-
sense.
The
you
on
say
emblem of Severed
HP.
Fate domain is so good. Holy shit.
No,
Oh my
Tenten,
God.
HP on Xiangling because you run home
Home?
Xiangling and then
Oh,
you can
God.
actually make use of the HP stuff.
Yeah.
Just
Exactly.
get an R5 one where so it scales faster than attack.
True.
Okay. Dude, just oh my god. The Raiden engulfing lightning thing just cracks me up every time. Every time I read something where like an off stat will like scale faster than other stats is just so funny. Like I think Hu Tao's EM scales faster than crit into like 100 EM.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
Well, EM
it's always
busted.
so funny to me.
EM is actually busted.
Yeah, and then well, it's not EM is busted. It's these units who have damage distributions and reaction mappings, basically like which attacks melt and vape. Like they have
Yeah.
very, very easy ones to abuse.
Like-
I don't know, things like Raiden having enough ER where it scales better than her attack is just so funny to me. Anything else?
Oh, one
You
thing
got
I
a
do want
question?
to talk about for EM.
Yeah.
I saw this. I don't know. This has like very little to do with what we were just talking about, but EM is like so misunderstood by a lot of people. And I do think that would be valuable for maybe I don't know, maybe KQM put out a video on like how does EM actually work and why is it so good for some characters? Because I was looking at the Game 8 website, right? And they said
Mhm.
EM boosts your elemental burst and elemental skill damage. I was like, what? That's completely incorrect.
Dude, everyone thinks of EM as like
A bad stat.
you either go all in or you don't go touch it at all. It's one of those
I
stats
mean,
where you have to balance.
part of it was my fault because when I first started making video, I said EM was bad, which to be honest is not wrong because back then we had Diluc and EM is bad on Diluc. That's the only reaction character.
Well, it's
And
okay on him because
it
you're getting
was
buffed by
okay,
Bennett, so you
yeah.
don't.
You just don't want like a bug ton of it because you can't react that much over his
Yeah.
rotation.
the only character who
like-
kind of cared about EM was Diluc, right? Back then, I mean,
like to like
Venti.
well Venti,
yeah.
but like we didn't know.
Well,
back then.
no, back then
And
like
we didn't
EM
have his
Venti-
transformative
yeah.
buff back then.
Yeah, we
I mean
didn't.
Xiangling still existed. We were just stupid.
We just didn't know, yeah. So, but now like
Sucrose existed, we just don't.
so we can dive a little bit deep into it. But EM is better than crit, unless you have like say more than 300 or 200 maybe. But EM is actually like just better than crit for a character who can use it. And nowadays when we talk about character who can use it, they can probably use it really well because most of them have no ICD. We talk about like Hu Tao, charge attack, no ICD, Xiangling Power Needle, charge attack, no ICD. And on top of that, you don't really care about attack as much because Bennett exists and other attack source exists. Certain character doesn't use EM that well. These examples are like Kaya, who only melts 1 out of 3 Icicle. Yomiya, who doesn't melt her entire string. So for these characters, attack could still benefit more just because when you don't do reaction, EM does nothing.
Oh, what are you talking about? I run full EM on my Ito because I love those shields.
Crystallize. Oh yeah. Also, EM sucks on
Chat
Geo.
Eater.
EM sucks on Geo characters.
No. I did an account review for Celeste, a couple of days back, and they had a Shat Albedo.
I
And
feel like-
Shat Beto, I think, is the best possible build.
I think a lot of people don't know this, by the way. But if you
Shut the
ever
fuck
run
up. No,
the,
it's not.
if you ever run Raiden National, you won like 300 to 400 EM on channeling because overload. I think, right? Pretty sure. I think
It's
around
EM. EM is definitely more beneficial. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, for other selling builds, it's like you, either you run attack or you run EM for most other selling builds. Besides, like if you're running the EM weapon like Dragon's Bane, because they're just so close. Because you do get a lot of attack from Bennett, yes, which makes attack less valuable. But selling also has her own base EM, which makes EM less valuable. So attack and EM are basically equal for most sailing builds. With Ryan National, however, you just almost always want to go EM over attack.
apparently we're at 53 channeling mentioned from the chat. I wonder if you know what I wonder. I wonder if YouTube or well, you can't see chat on Spotify, but there's gameplay footage on YouTube. I wonder if people who are watching this on YouTube actually look at the screen, because I imagine most of them just tap and listen, right? So the chat is not displayed it on the YouTube footages, but I'm curious if people like want to see the chat, because if you're like a YouTube audience and you have never seen Twitch chat, the only thing they do is they smash their keyboard every time channeling get mentioned. Like that's all they do. That's all.
It's just XL OPA. XL
You know what?
OPA. XL OPA.
I'll show them right now. Hold on. I'll show them right now. Here. So the chat's gonna be in the recording from this point on, and you guys can see what they look like. That's all they do. So that's why I don't put it in. That's all they do.
We need to start posting these transcripts with everything, by the way. I'll have to go back because we have a transcript for every podcast except for the last one. But okay, I think that exhausts our topics for this week, right?
Yep.
We don't really have much to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll close it out. Here we go. We're gonna have a question and answer section real quick. So if you want to join us next time, we'll be live on Twitch and you can ask us questions. But this has been Theory Crafting Roundtable podcast number 9, I think. So yeah, thank you, Azel. Thank you, Tenten. Thank you, XF3 for joining us today. I am Artesians, and it has been a pleasure to have you. If you're listening on YouTube, check it out on Spotify or Apple Cast, I think. You can find it under the Kaching Mains' Theory Casting, and you can download it there and listen. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye
Bye, guys.